Hello, everybody. My name's James, and welcome to a special preview of the new women's football season. I'm delighted to be joined by our women's football correspondent, Lauren Harris. How are you, Lauren?
I'm very good, thanks, James. How are you?
Yeah, all well, thank you. Before we talk WSL clubs and new season, I thought it was worth touching on Emma Hayes, who has obviously left Chelsea. A bit of an era, bit of a change of an end of an era. She's already winning things with the US. How will her spell as Chelsea manager be looked back upon? I mean, is she considered in women's football terms a little bit like Sir Alex Ferguson in terms of achievements, for example?
Well, she compared herself to Alex Ferguson. I think it was yesterday or in a recent interview. I'd say in terms of where women's football is at the moment, you can't really argue against it in the sense of, the WSL is, in terms of a football league, is still relatively in its infancy, and she's been there for, practically all of it. She has led Chelsea to most WSL titles. I think it's 7 out of the 12 seasons that she managed them for. And it's not just her management. I think it's the whole impact she's had on the women's game in England. Um, and I think you can see that in the States now. I think perhaps depending on how Chelsea do this season, I think maybe people will only start to see the effects of the impact she's had on English football, you know, after she's left. I think when Ferguson was at Man United, he was well respected, and maybe not the same in the sense of you don't know what you've got till it's gone. I think with Emma Hayes, we will maybe see that in the future. I mean, the fact that she's gone straight to the United States, that team who looked woeful at the Women's World Cup, and she's just like what pretty much seems like overnight, only left Chelsea in May and has already won them Olympic gold, changed the way they're playing. They look so much more confident, free flowing. I think it's just, yeah, testament to what a great manager she is, really.
She said that was her greatest achievement in football, winning the Olympics for the US. Did that come across the dig a little bit? Was that aimed at someone, do you think?
Um, I don't think, I think if she'd have won the Champions League with Chelsea, then perhaps I think that would, well, I don't know, it's Olympic gold, but that possibly, that's the pinnacle of club football, isn't it? Um, the WSL, I guess, probably still isn't seen as the best league in the world, even though we'd like to think it is. Um, but the Olympics for women's football is a very big stage. The best players go, generally, the best teams go. It's not like the men's Olympics where you're only allowed to play, what is it, three over
Over
three
23,
for
yeah.
20, or yeah. Um, so winning the Olympics in the women's game is a really big deal. And I guess, she can say she's an Olympic gold medalist. If you think about that in any other sport, that's the pinnacle, isn't it? So
Yeah.
um,
What's your reaction when you heard she was leaving Chelsea?
I wasn't surprised, but I thought she would be leaving Chelsea for the England job and not the American job. And I guess probably a bit gutted that America have got her. Not that I want Serena to leave England or anything like that, but um, and I do think she will manage England in the future. But she's kind of made it clear that she wants to stay there for 5 years or so at least. So, um, I think she deserved that job. And pre World Cup, it probably would have been seen as the biggest job in world football, and it probably still is. But obviously the results in the World Cup maybe dented the USA's image. Um, but yeah, it hasn't taken long for her to bring that right back to the forefront.
No, and I don't think any of us are that surprised that she's gone and achieved a major trophy with her new team essentially within a month or so. A month or so. You mentioned that we'd possibly like to think that the WSL is the biggest league. I'm just interested to know which leagues you think are stronger, just briefly. And is the US one of them?
Yeah, the NWSL, I think, um, if you look at like even the English players that have gone over there, Esme Morgan, Katie Zellum, Jess Carter, Jen Beattie, there are big players from the WSL, maybe not the biggest and the best, but players from all over the world are choosing to go to the NWSL. They've obviously got all of the top American talent, Canadian talent. I think the, I mean, last year was more competitive, but the fact that Chelsea have won the league for the last, few seasons, it's there's been a question about the competitiveness of the league. It's still a fairly small league in terms of number of teams as well. I'm hoping that in the not too distant future there'll be a bit of an expansion, but we'll have to see how things pan out with that.
I might ask that because it would have felt natural, I think, because the US is such a strong league, that they would pick their successor for the management job from their own country. And what that even says about Hayes in itself, the fact that they've come over here to take what they perceive to be the strongest from Europe, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, before she managed Chelsea, she did manage in America, so I think she has, she must have links in terms of contacts from her previous time. And I think she was getting to the point where she'd not maybe lost the interest, but being at Chelsea for 12 years is a long time. And I know she spoke a lot about her son, being an international coach as opposed to a club coach. Actually, you get more time to spend with family, for example. So I know that that was a factor in the decision that she made. Like I say, I just wish that it was the England job, not now we're going to have to face the Americans with Emma Hayes as manager in the next World Cup.
I don't suppose she'll be throwing it against us.
No,
Do,
no.
that's obviously kind of the top of the women's game, essentially, as you basically said, basically US job. And I get she would maybe want to do the England job as well. Do you feel she feels she's at the pinnacle of the sport now, managing the
Oh
US
yeah,
team?
yeah, definitely. And I think the only thing she hasn't got is the Champions League, but I think you'd have to say she is the best women's football manager as it stands. Um, and like I said before, not just in, I mean, her people management is evidently really good. The players that the US have got, she hasn't if the fact that she won the Olympics within a month, that's not necessarily her coaching and tactics because that takes time to implement. But her people management, I think she's essentially given those players the confidence back that, for them to believe in their own talents. There was a really great interview after the Olympics with her and Lindsay Horan where she was basically just, bigging up her leadership as captain. And Lindsay Horan cried, and I've never seen. She's quite a strong character. I've never seen her kind of that emotional, and I think it's those little things that go on behind the scenes that perhaps people don't see that really makes her a great leader.
What does Chelsea look like without her now? Because we'd referenced Ferguson. United haven't won the
Yeah.
title since he went in 2013. Is there a danger, or should Chelsea fans be concerned about that?
Well, Sonia Bonpastor, who's come in from Lyon, is another great manager. She has won the Champions League, so I know that that's one that they're going to be targeting. They've also made some good signings. Obviously, Lucy Bronze has gone. Neve Charles, unfortunately, has picked up an injury. I don't think it's confirmed for how long, but if it's as expected, it's probably 3 to 4 months. So that's not great. But their strength in depth, the squad depth is so strong. Um, you know, not to talk about my team Liverpool, but I think it's probably a bit more like Slot being part of Klopp's squad, for Bonpastor receiving Hayes' squad. No, I don't think she's left them in a um bad shape. They've got rid of some players, so Fran Kirby's gone to Brighton. Jess Carter, as I said, has gone abroad. But Fran Kirby's, you know, not nearing the end of her career. I'm sure she could probably go on for a few more years, but she's not the player that she once was. And I think Bonpastor has come in and been quite ruthless in who she's got rid of. But at the same time, they've brought in some really good players, and they won 9-0 against Feyenoord this weekend. So I don't think they're gonna struggle.
Who's likely to challenge them? Bookies are suggesting it's probably a freeway again with Manchester City and Arsenal challenging. Is that how you would see
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I'd say Arsenal should be stronger this season. I think Jonas Eidevall is under a bit of pressure. I know they won the Conti Cup last season, but um, I think the fact that they finished third again last season. City obviously took it to the last day, and Arsenal's downfall wasn't necessarily against in the matches against City and Chelsea. It was losing to West Ham and drawing against Everton and games like that. But Arsenal have strengthened as well. So they've got Mariona Caldente from Barcelona, which I think is a great signing. Really looking forward to watching her. And Kafaji, who's done really well in pre-season. They didn't stumble in the Champions League over the last couple of games that have happened this weekend and last midweek. And that was kind of last season when they got knocked out of the Champions League at this stage. That kind of stunted their season before it even begun. So I would expect Arsenal to improve. I mean, they were obviously very close last season. I'm hoping it's going to go to the wire again. And the same for Man City, to be honest. I think all three teams, if they can keep consistency, hopefully we will get a freeway title race again. City have obviously signed Miedemar from Arsenal. A lot of people were shocked at the fact that Arsenal let Miedemar go to one of their biggest rivals.
Is there concern how she's recovered from the injury that she had?
Yeah. And I mean, when they signed Russo, pre-Russo, Miedemar was the main striker. And I think when they signed Russo, it was always maybe evident that, they're different types of players. So one of them, they're not going to fit into one of them's not going to fit into the style of play, and they've worked their style around Russo. So, I think there were frustrations, there were arguments between Miedemar and the coach. So it's not surprising she left. I'm just surprised that they allowed her to go to City.
It could be one hell of a front line, couldn't it, with Bunny Shaw up front for City?
Yeah. Yeah, and well, that's the thing. Chloe Kelly, Lauren Hemp, City have got so much attacking talent. I think the only thing with City is if one of those big hitters gets injured, I think of the three teams, they've probably got the least quality in depth. Arsenal have got very strong defence in terms of starting back four and cover. So, defensively, Arsenal are probably more solid out of the two. But yeah, there's as as it was last season, fingers crossed it's going to be just as exciting again.
Is there a danger that the league feels a little bit on the outside, who doesn't follow it as closely as you do? It feels a little bit like when we had the big four here in the men's game, where United, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Arsenal were quite a distance better than the rest for a number of years. Does it feel that way a little bit with the women's game with the top three at the moment? Or is someone like yourselves, Liverpool or Manchester United, likely to rein that in this year?
Um, Man United were getting there, and I think they've taken a couple of steps backwards. Um, I I think Liverpool overperformed last season. Obviously, it was great finishing fourth, finishing above Man United. That was, really nice. Unexpected, but I don't think at the moment there isn't the maybe not the investment, but the quality of the squads just aren't good enough to compete. Man United have lost Mary Earps, Katie Zellum. They have signed Grace Clinton from Spurs, who will be a huge loss for Spurs. So I would expect Man United to come fourth, but I don't think that they have a strong enough squad to compete with the top three.
And I guess that goes
Sadly.
for the others as well. Your Tottenhams, your Evertons, your Brightons.
Yeah, Brighton have recruited well, and maybe they'll be on the fringes with Man United. Those sort of mid-table positions. Spurs, having lost Grace Clinton, I don't worry for them. They're not going to get relegated because they've still got a good enough squad. But I think that they'll probably be the lower out of those teams you mentioned, possibly.
Just trying to dig me out now, yeah.
Well,
Manager,
obviously,
manager knows what he's doing. They
I
play they
want
play a really
Everton
nice
to be
brand of
the worst.
football now.
Yeah, and Beth England up top, scoring the goals. It's fine.
Yeah. Beth will always get us a few. And Jess Naz is lightning quick as well. It
Mm,
was nice to see
yeah.
her make her England debut towards the end of last season as well. This is interesting, is this would be the first time of a WSL season where all 12 clubs are actually Premier League club in terms of
Hmm.
the men's as well. Obviously, we lost Bristol City last year, with Leicester City getting promoted back as well, and Crystal Palace promoted into the WSL. The 12 women's clubs are all in the men's Premier League as well. Should we read anything into that?
Yes. So the championship, the league below, will only have 11 teams competing this season, and that's because of Reading being um, relegated, if you like, to the fifth tier of women's football because of the financial implications of the men's side for Reading. There was a kind of a negative article about Blackburn women based off the salaries that they were receiving. Um, and both of those things are as a result of the fact that they rely too heavily on the men's team, probably. Um, and because those men's teams, are maybe don't have the same finances to offer, yes, we should definitely read into it. Newcastle, it's not, there's no coincidence that Newcastle have seen promotions since the Saudi takeover. They would be a club that I expect to, if not get promoted this season, then in the near future. They've invested in players like Demi Stokes, who, in my opinion, should still be playing in the WSL. So yeah, I mean it's definitely financial support that the Premier League, those Premier League clubs give that, you know, Palace, for example, that was a very close race with Charlton, who you could argue the men are in League One. But Charlton women have historically always been at the top of all this football. Before the WSL, Charlton women got to FA Cup finals and won league titles. So they've got a long history in women's football. So yeah, I mean, London City Lionesses in
This
the
is
Championship.
interesting because this is the
Mm.
complete polar opposite, isn't it? Where you've got an owner in charge, Michelle Kang, is it,
Hmm.
who has got a multi-club ownership model. She also owns obviously Lyon, who have been hugely successful in the women's game, and has aspirations to make London City Lionesses WSL champions. So how do you go about doing that, considering the backdrop of we've now got there's 12 elite Premier League clubs as part of the WSL. You've got
Hmm.
this modest. I would have just said that name. People got who? London City Lionesses. It's just a standalone. It's not linked to a men's team at all, is it? I don't believe.
No.
It's just a standalone. She wants to grow the brand. She wants to show that good can be done alone in terms of just the women's game and not relying on the men's game, as you said. How are they going to go about doing it and achieving it? It's worth saying everybody who joins there is so excited by the project that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean they've been able to attract for the league that they are in. They've been able to attract, really good players. As Lani, who is now their captain, Swedish international, um, phenomenal player, is now playing in the Women's Championship for London City Lionesses. Like it's unbelievable, really. That would never have happened before. You've never seen, players of her quality play in the Women's Championship. I think they are doing really good things on social media. Um, they've kind of they've kind of built up this buzz in the last couple of summers where, they're like revealing new signings. Um, even players, so Rusha Littlejohn, who's plays for Ireland, she was at Villa before. She, she's not an amazing player, but the amount of buzz and excitement they managed to build up last summer for her signing, um, they're very good at the media, promotion side of things. Um, Michelle Kang is obviously at the moment, you know, putting lots of money in. And if they can get a promotion to the WSL, then I think the way they're selling the project to the players and the way that they are campaigning and projecting themselves on social media, I think players will naturally want to jump on board. I guess you also haven't got the restrictions of being part of the men's team, and what I mean by that is they have complete control over what they do and the decisions they make, and they know that they're not going to be influenced by Crystal Palace men getting relegated or whatever it is. So I think that helps as well. And she is, as you say, she's obviously owning Lyon, who are a bigger club, will have a much bigger kind of financial structure, as well as Washington in the NWSL. The more kind of money she can make from those clubs, I guess she can then redistribute it across the
I'm interested.
franchise, if you like.
I'm fascinated in the aspect of what will happen with this club because I think it's okay to take this project and invest in it, etc. But once you hit the Super League level, and if you then want to push towards the Champions League, you're then trying to be a very different football club. And I just wonder about it, obviously being in London. Am I right in saying they're based around the Kent area? Is that correct? So
Yeah, well, it's London, Kent, we don't.
yeah, but it's not that far from Chelsea. And you've got so many other clubs in the London area. You've mentioned Charlton, Crystal Palace just been promoted. They're in obviously the south region of the country. Arsenal is from South London. Sorry, little dig in. But you've got Tottenham in the top division, West Ham in the top division. It's also not far to Brighton as a southern club, easy access from London as well. How do they then, if they get up, how do they compete with these other clubs that have got the established fan bases, if you will,
Mhm.
and then compete at the top level? How are they going to go about doing that?
I think being a teacher, I see this on a daily basis. The us older people, as I would call us now, who
I feel like you were
maybe
looking through my soul then, Lauren.
well, what I mean by that is we maybe didn't grow up in a social media age,
Yeah.
right? Um, Young people, it doesn't matter where you live, say they the way they gravitate to things on social media and so quickly. I think if you can get the online presence down, then that like they will be able to trump clubs. Arsenal, for example, Chelsea have been winning the WSLs. They've been the most successful team, but Arsenal still have the bigger fan base than Chelsea. Arsenal are playing 8 games at the Emirates. Chelsea are only playing 3 games at Stamford Bridge. And all of those things matter and make a difference. Chelsea have had tons of money for years, but they do have, plenty of fans, but Arsenal still have a bigger fan base in terms of women's football. So I think if you can market it right and to the right people, you are going to be fine in terms of fans. Also, I guess if you think of Chelsea as West London, Arsenal and Tottenham as North London, West Ham, East London, there isn't obviously Crystal Palace in the WSL at the moment, but there isn't really that big South London team that has a huge men's following like Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs. So obviously I'm from Kent. When I was a child growing up, I didn't have that big football team near me to support. So obviously, if I was a teenager now or a child now growing up, London City Lionesses probably would have been the team that my dad took me to, for example, because
Yeah,
it
I
will
get
be the
that.
closest.
But then you also
Um,
say the gravitational pull. It's interesting the idea that you would still maybe pick this new team based on what they're doing socially against the
mhm.
team that's not that far away, who's got every chance to win the Champions League this year, for example. Well, it's two of them.
Yeah, I think that's just the world we live in. That the social media age of even little things like, and I've seen a lot more clubs, women's football, kind of in the third, fourth, fifth tiers doing this now. Just silly little videos on things like TikTok or Instagram that are going to engage with the audience. So, like, there was a team from London, I think they're London Seawood, and video popped up earlier when I was on social media, and they were literally just asking the players, like, what did you do last night at 9:30? A silly little question. And then, but they're all answering, and then they're giving funny answers of whatever. If you're a young person watching that, and then you can relate to the players, then you get to know the players through those sorts of social media, they start to build those connections. And I think that's what a lot of young people, young girls who like football, have really connected with people like Mary Earps, because she's really good on social media in that sense. Um, I think some women's footballers are really good at selling their personalities. I think in men's football, it's maybe not. They're a bit maybe more scared of using
Hold the
social
media
media.
line a lot more, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas women are a bit more. The women's footballers are a bit more free, and I think the young people are able to connect with them a bit more.
I did read, interesting though, on that topic. I did read that Chelsea are going to stop the players from greeting the fans after games now. They're actually going to put that in place. That's because it's a security decision. And in fairness to the
Hmm.
club, they have said they'll host other social events where they can do meet and greets. That's a change in itself as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably the right decision. Um, the After the Euros win, I think the um, support kind of blew up a bit in England in terms of you know people actually being interested in women's football outside of international football, and I think the sheer number of people that are going to greet the players, not just Chelsea, it's many of the WSL clubs. Um, it it's kind of testament to how far the women's game's come that they're having to do that, really.
Yeah. Um, I think it's probably had to be done when the size of the crowd some got in. I mean, to go back to your point on Arsenal, I mean, to give you a little difference between Arsenal and Chelsea as well, Arsenal are regularly filling the Emirates
Hmm.
as well. I don't think that's quite been the case for Chelsea and Stamford Bridge. And then to go back to London City, and then how do you grow that? I mean, because to compete with that, you've got to build a stadium, right? Where are they playing at the moment?
Good question.
So I know
Burton,
they played Newcastle at the weekend in the championship. It was 1,700 there, but apparently it was quite a number of travelling Newcastle fans as part of that as well.
I think that's at Bromley's ground that they played
Okay.
yesterday. Um, yeah, they don't. I mean, they'd have to build their own stadium. Like City Women's a bit different because it's at the Etihad
And,
campus,
and
but
and that would be unique as well because it would obviously
mm,
be their stadium rather than I know there's kind of a mixed view from many of the players at the moment in terms of playing in the club stadiums. Like I think in Arsenal's case, where they're getting, sort of circa 45,000 in the ground is probably like an average, roughly. That's great because it's
mhm.
absolutely worthwhile. If you're a little bit like I went to the Women's Cup semi-final at Tottenham, and I think it was 17,000 in the ground. It's good attendance, but inside White Hart Lane, that looks bad
Yeah,
because of the
yeah,
sheer
and
size of the place.
probably feels a bit hollow as
Yes,
well. Yeah, I
yes, it
think
does.
it's I think the issue that they've got at the moment is the options are the huge stadiums or stadiums that aren't quite big enough, which have got 5,000-6,000 capacity, and there's only so many stadiums, and it's got to be local enough that it's
Yeah,
still a home game. So it's difficult. I think the reason Arsenal are selling tickets is going back to the way that they promote themselves. Um, and I think that the men and the women's teams are very cohesive in terms of that. Whereas I think the Chelsea men and women probably aren't as.
I think
Um,
with Chelsea it's newer as well. Am I right in saying that? Like Arsenal, when I was first into society, women's football in the 1990s, Arsenal were big then.
they were,
Chelsea
yeah,
weren't. Is that fair?
yeah. No, that's totally fair. It was Arsenal, Charlton, Doncaster Bells who are in the they're gone. Um,
Millwall
Leeds,
Lionesses.
Millwall, yeah. I actually went to an FA Cup game at the Den, which was Arsenal Charlton. Um, so Arsenal, as you say, they do have that history. Um, I think it's just a case of keep. I think if we look at how big attendances are now, the average attendance now compared to say 2-3 years ago, you can only expect that in 2-3 years time from now, it will have elevated
Absolutely.
again.
Absolutely. You mentioned about structure of the league. Is that for you further down the line a different number of teams, i.e. a 16 team league or an 18 team league? Is that what your vision is further down the line?
I would hope so because if the WSL can be expanded, then that would indicate that the quality and the infrastructure across the country has improved. Because if you're increasing the WSL to 16, 18 teams, then the championship would also need to be a similar number of teams. Um, I think seeing seeing what's happening locally around me, the number of young girls playing football is only increasing, and I think the number of good quality players that we will produce in England is going to, increase. And so there's obviously going to need to be teams for all of those players. And hopefully it will just keep going up and up.
It's likely to be noises, I guess, from the championship as well, with only one team due promotion. We've obviously mentioned likes of London City,
Mm-hmm.
Newcastle, you've mentioned Charlton. Shout out for Bristol City, who came down last year. Fourth highest attendance in the WSL last year, at an average gate of over 7,000. So they'll obviously have aspirations to come back. And I think they've said again they're going to play all their games at Ashton Gate
Mm-hmm.
this season as well. So they're obviously a non-Premier League club who've got relegated, but they're keeping the commitment there to the women's team, which is really good. That's getting really competitive to get out of that league. Whereas it felt like it hasn't over the last few years. It felt like there'd be one or two teams and you knew it was going to be one or the other. Now you've got five or six pushing to get out of that league, and every year they don't make it, it's going to be a kickback, isn't it? Then you got someone else who's of a top standard dropping in, going to compete with you again. So I think there will be a push for that in the next few years.
Yeah, definitely. And people like Michelle Kang who are making all of this investment,
If
if
she doesn't
London's
get up,
exactly. So they're going to be trying to force it somehow, aren't they? The only thing I would say is that as much quality as there is pushing up, the last few seasons, that team that has then gone up, like Bristol City last season, were poor in comparison
Yeah,
to
I understand.
WSL. So there is still, quite
But
a big
that
gap.
hasn't always been the case, is it, Liverpool? And
No.
I realise again the size of the football club. Also, similarly, my club, you spoke about Arsenal being around the 90s. Tottenham feels like it's been a complete infancy, basically,
Hmm.
as a football club. It's basically a brand new football club in terms of the
Hmm.
women's department. It's only really been trying to push for sort of like the last 5 or 6 years or so. So there's a lot of clubs like that. I think Liverpool probably falls into that category a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see a reformation happening. The problem with that is though, you then need like the championship's strong now. That's really good for the pyramid and the
Hmm.
sustainability of it. I guess if you move it to like 18 teams and then the second division is not good enough again, then if someone drops from that league into that, it becomes more problematic. Whereas actually there's an interest in the championship. As we said, there was a game at the weekend with 1700 there.
Yeah, I think the National League, which is essentially the third tier as well, the attendances that they're getting and the quality of those matches is also increasing. The teams that are towards the top of the National League, I think the difference between quality of Championships National League is a lot smaller than Championships WSL. So, for example, if you had to bring teams from the National League up to the Championship to increase that size, I don't think that would be such an issue.
Yeah.
Um, so
Positive. We're also getting a restructure for the Champions League. Now, one of the things that struck out to me over the last couple of years is like our teams can get into it, but then after time they're not into it. Am I
yeah,
right in saying Arsenal went out in the qualifiers
last
last
season, yeah,
year?
yeah.
So, I mean, we feel like we've got divine right in England here, right, where the English clubs go straight into the competition, but that's not the case, right?
No, and you say we've got divine right, but I think it's just common sense that teams like Arsenal City,
That's divine
you
right,
want
though.
to see them. But the quality of players that they've got, um, you can't. Yeah, I mean, Arsenal and City are both in the next round. City got there automatically by finishing second, and Arsenal beat Rosenborg at the weekend. So hopefully they'll get to the group stages this year, but they haven't got easy fixtures. Arsenal are playing Hacken, who got to the quarterfinals last season, and City have drawn Paris FC. Paris FC are the team who beat Arsenal last
Yeah.
season, qualifying to knock them
That's
out.
not to
So
be confused with PSG. Am I right in saying that?
no, no, yeah, not completely different teams, yeah. Um, so it's not going to be easy for either of them to get through. And the last few seasons, the Champions League hope for England has been Chelsea, and not even they have been able to, other than the Champions League final that they got to. Not even they
Should
have been able to bring it home.
should should City and Arsenal make it through to the group stage and then there's the three clubs in there?
Hmm.
How much of a chance have they got going all the way? Because this feels like this would also, I feel, if one of them did win it, would also give a real psychological change to the psyche of the club football in this country. How close are they? Because it's always felt like Chelsea running to Barcelona was always going to be one step too far over the last few years. That's how it's felt.
I would say that in the semi-final last season, Chelsea were unlucky. Um, they won the first game at the new camp, and then Barcelona showed their quality in the second game. But I don't think the the gap to Barcelona is as big as it has been. There's been a lot of change at Barcelona as well. Lucy Bronze, not that she was, they've obviously still got Bon Matti and Pateas and Paraluega and Kira Walsh, and you could carry on forever. But I think the fact that they have lost a few players, um, Bon Pastor has gone to Chelsea, left Leon, who would have been formidable, and maybe they still will be. But the fact that she's gone to Chelsea with that experience, hopefully, this I think this season they have a good chance. And like I said, they have strengthened as well, so their squad is really, really strong.
Did the other clubs want the others to do well? So, like, would
No,
Arsenal and City fans want Chelsea to do well or not?
would you want Arsenal
No,
men to win?
I
So
wouldn't want
yeah, no.
Arsenal women to do it either. Particularly.
I think if you don't support those three clubs, you want an English club to
I
win the
get it.
Champions League. I think it's like the same. I wouldn't want any English club to win the Champions League other than Liverpool in the men's competition. But when I speak to friends who aren't fans of teams that are typically in the Champions League, they will support the English team. So I think it
Okay.
comes down to
Is there
who's
any?
in it.
I guess is there any rivalry between those clubs from a sporting perspective at that time?
Yeah,
Is probably had
yeah,
an impact of it. Okay, interesting. So the Champions League format is changing from next season 25-26. Like the men's, it's going to be this Swiss model league phase, but only 18 teams.
yeah.
Why?
Well, they're introducing a second competition, which I don't think they've
They
released
haven't
what
even
it's going to
named
be
it yet.
called.
Presumably it's going to be the Europa League,
But
no?
that's essentially,
Yeah.
yeah, what it is. That will be, I presume, in England, the fourth place team, and they've also said that teams that aren't successful in the Champions League will drop into the Europa League, like happens in the men's game. So I guess their argument would be, they're going to be having X amount of teams in that competition, so they can only afford to increase the Champions League by a certain amount. But I agree. I think they should have increased it to 24 teams, to be honest. But I'm not a UEFA person.
The way that one's going to work is it's going to be the top four will automatically go to a quarterfinals.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess it will be fifth to 12th will go into playoff to then get your remaining four quarterfinalists. Is it a scheduling issue? Is it concern about state of pitches and things like that?
Um, Pitch is probably not.
I'm just trying to think
Well,
globally. Just for the English clubs, not a problem. I'm just trying to think about
mm,
the rest of the European game. Is that part of the concern that it'll be, oh, if we schedule games in December, they might not happen and that sort of thing?
possibly. Um, I mean, you'd like to think that the clubs in the Champions League are playing in stadiums that have a high enough quality of pitch, but I guess with the men's Champions League expansion, if you've got for example, Arsenal play their Champions League games at the Emirates. If you've got Arsenal men playing all of those extra Champions League games, as well as Arsenal women, then yeah, that they're always going to prioritise the men. So maybe that's the consideration. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. How are the Lionesses doing at the moment?
Well, I mean, we haven't seen them for a while. They played June. They, they did okay. Um, Qualified for the Euros, so yeah, that's something to celebrate.
We was always going
Um,
to qualify, wasn't we? That even if we hadn't qualified, we still would have
well,
qualified. Is my kind of understanding of that.
yeah, so Sweden have got to play in playoffs, um, but the quality of team that they're going to come up against,
Is weak.
it would be catastrophic to not beat them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will be the same
But
for Sweden as well now, right? But Sweden will
yeah,
still qualify.
yeah. And I think it's a lot nicer for the Lionesses that they haven't got that playoff because they're able to have games. They're playing Germany in October at Wembley. They're playing the USA, so they're able to schedule friendlies against stronger
Top opponents,
opposition.
yeah.
Yeah, to prepare themselves. I think there was a bit of concern off the back of the World Cup with the performances in the first few games after the World Cup, but that seems to have kind of alleviated now. I guess that could be, the emotions of what happened against Spain, and maybe having that hope and not achieving. So maybe it took them a bit of time to get over it, but I think they'll be fully focused now on going to the Euros and retaining, hopefully, the title.
When you watched the men's Euro final in the
Mm.
summer, did it remind you of the women's final a bit?
It did.
That we were just a
Yeah.
bit short quality wise, and actually was a
Yeah.
greater disparity between the men's and the women's.
And that it was disappointing, but you couldn't argue it. I think that feeling of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably fair. Spain are the best in the world in the women's game. Spain were the best at the Euros throughout the whole competition, weren't they? Really, in the men's. So, I think the difference is Serena is obviously adored and liked a lot more than Gareth Southgate was. So.
Oh, I'd still love Gareth. And listen, it was an incredible achievement for the Lionesses to his first final, wasn't it? In the world tournament
Hmm.
anywhere as well.
Hmm.
So that was a great achievement. It just felt like a little something was missing with that tournament. And I hope they put it right in is it in Switzerland, the Euros,
Yes.
the next one?
Yes.
And that's next summer, isn't it?
Yeah. Next July.
Good, because I'd rather watch that than the Club World Cup anyway. So that's good to know that's on. I just want to touch on attending games before we finish.
Hmm.
So you got a season ticket at the Emirates. Am I right in saying that this year?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's technically not a season ticket, so it's a ticket for the 8 games that they're playing out of the 11 home
Yep.
games at the Emirates. Um, and I've also got the free ticket bundle that Chelsea are doing at Stamford Bridge. I'm going to West Ham to see West Ham Liverpool. I'm going to try and get tickets to Spurs Liverpool if it works out with my schedule. So I'm going to try and get to a game a week. I'm quite fortunate that I'm close enough to London to be able to do that. Financially, in terms of, it's obviously not cheap going to games, but the tickets are a good price. The
Reasonably
Arsenal ticket,
priced.
yeah, the Arsenal ticket ended up £10 per match. Um,
Yeah, I
so
think Tottenham have just announced the three major ones, I think. So I think Arsenal, Chelsea, City, I think they've said are going to be at White Hart Lane. And I think it's the same. It's you can get that £30 for the three games
yeah,
now, I think, if you want to.
yeah, and that's good. That's affordable. And I think that's why Arsenal have been able to have such high attendances because they've got their pricing structure right. And I think it's just a case of, I mean, I want to go first and foremost because I want to go and watch the women's football, but I also want to support the game. Now I'm not playing. I want to, those attendances really will make a difference, hopefully. Unfortunately, it's not financially viable for me to travel up to Liverpool and watch Liverpool every week. Otherwise, I would. Which is why, luckily there are 5 teams around London that I can go to. I'm planning to try and go to the Brighton Liverpool game when that's in Brighton as well. So it will be the first season where I'm actively going to matches and supporting Liverpool women as a supporter. So I'm quite excited for that.
Good. I hope you enjoy it. I had my first personal experience of women's football towards the end of last season because of Tottenham's run to the
Mm-hmm.
Women's FA Cup final. As I said, I went to the semi-final, which was a home game, which I found a little bit bizarre. But I don't know if that's for attendance reasons as money reasons as well, possibly. 17,000 at White Lane was actually, it sounds really modest. It's actually quite an effort considering what I said about how basically new the women's side of the football club is. And they won in extra time. They were expected to win. It was, I think, it might have been Leicester City's first appearance in the semi as
Mm-hmm.
well, possibly. So it was guaranteed a new finalist. Manchester United beat Chelsea in the other semi-final. So it was kind of known that there was a chance even for the underdog in the final as well. We won in extra time. It was nice, but I have to say, when they were celebrating at the end and we were around the pitch, I felt a bit like a fraud. I said that
Hmm.
openly on one of our Patreon podcasts. Felt it was my club, but it wasn't my club. I felt I was pleased to see Tottenham winning,
Yeah.
and it was my first experience doing it. But I also felt a bit detached, like I was taking someone else's enjoyment, but actually there was 40,000 empty seats, so I wasn't taking anybody's enjoyment. But I felt a bit fraudish about it, and I didn't really want to stay too long. Then I felt doubly fraudish because I obviously got hold of a ticket for the final. From I think we got 12,000 allocation, and to be fair, Tottenham did do it so that the women's season ticket holders were guaranteed. People had been to a certain amount of league games were guaranteed tickets. Then it was like a scramble for about 3,000 tickets, and me and my dad went, and it was very reasonably priced. I mean, it was £15 for the
Hmm.
final. Sell out at Wembley. Amazing atmosphere. So when people say to me, when was the last time you saw Tottenham in an FA Cup final? I say actually it was this year. Less of the fact that we lost 4-0. There's two sides of it though, and we got absolutely destroyed. Um, Again, it was a great spectacle to be a part of, and it showed me what the growth of women's football live in front of me could be. And when you're seeing the white flags, it's like, yes, this is my football club, but I still feel apart from it. It was sad for them how badly they got defeated, but I couldn't feel the emotion of it yet. It
Hmm.
didn't really matter to me if they won or lost. And I
Yeah.
suppose that's only earned over time in the same way the Lionesses captured a lot of us to then want
Yeah.
to support them. Like I would consider myself, I certainly wouldn't say this for club football, but I'd be more interested in what the Lionesses do than Tottenham's ladies team at the moment, which is really interesting. I don't quite know how to define that yet.
I mean, I guess you have, I remember you talking about the Euros and how as the tournament went on, you got more and more into it. And I guess probably, um, like players like Kira Walsh, I know that you enjoyed watching, for
Love
example.
her.
Um, I guess the more you watch Spurs women, the more that will grow. And to be honest, I don't think it was the same for me with Liverpool. And, I obviously I'm a female who's grown up in football. I've followed women's football since a child, but I think there hasn't women's football hasn't necessarily had that tribalism that men's football has, and I think that is growing now. The as big as the attendances have been at matches, there's only just started being away allocations introduced. So, you know, the last few games I went to the Emirates last season, people at that game, some of them weren't necessarily supporting Arsenal openly. And if you did that in a men's game, you'd be held
Yeah.
abuse until you got out. So I think at the moment the fan support is still
It's
in
in
its
its
infancy.
infancy. Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Um.
I'd love to add as well in terms of tribalism's great. There's two sides because I love the tribalism about football as long as it's contained properly. I think atmosphere in football is so important. But also to reflect on that in the final and to say there's 90,000 there.
Mhm.
And there was more Manchester United, I think it's fair to say. So there's 40,000 of them and there's 25,000 of us, and there's a load of neutrals were there at the women's final as well. You didn't need a police officer there.
No.
The only reason they're there is for security issues. That's it. And when I say security issue, I mean keeping everyone safe. That's
Mhm.
it. Nobody's a danger to each other. And you can put 90,000 football fans in one place and not worry that they're going to go and kill each other. There's no way it could be like that for a men's final at Wembley, I think, between any two clubs.
No. I mean, you probably saw in both of those games you went to, the atmosphere is just very different.
It's a party.
Um.
It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. It's positive. Yeah. Um. I remember going to watch a Lionesses game with my other half, and she's a Millwall fan, and she's used to hurling abuse at the Millwall players. That's just what
She
they
would be
do.
supporting that football club, Lauren.
Well, and they're just always negative, negative, negative. And we went to a Lionesses game and she started screaming at the player. So what are you doing? You can't like we don't do that at
It's
women's
different here
football.
with behaviour.
Yeah, what are we doing? It's not the den.
There's great excitement. The atmosphere is very different.
Mm,
It's exciting. It reminds me a little bit when Spurs played Korea and at the goal on the attack, the noise, everyone's just
yeah.
so excited. It's just a difference, and that's at men's football. But just the noise and the atmosphere is just completely different. It's like a different level of excitement. That tribalism will probably grow with the game. I hope it doesn't pick up some of the bad habits that the men's game
Mm.
has, though. It's got to be
I
careful not to
think
do that.
yeah, I think naturally with um I mean I don't this might sound sexist, but I think the amount of women that are going to be going to the games as opposed to men, like testosterone, for example, and maybe the type of men that are going to go to a women's football game, no matter how much you get into your team, I doubt we will see the same kind of levels of aggression.
No, I get that, and again, it probably didn't matter so much. But then take that women's cup final. So loads of
Mm,
faces I know who are obviously regularly, who clearly would normally be supporting the men's team and have gone for the day out at Wembley because the men's team is never getting to the FA Cup final, is it? So we'll make a day of it, and all went off very peacefully. It probably
yeah,
like I don't maybe it'd have been different if we lost 2-1 and it was really narrow and edgy at the end. I just can't foresee that it would have been.
yeah, I mean, I guess they're the same as you in that emotion. They're not
Yeah.
yet there with the connection. But I think the fact that people are going is a positive because
Yes.
hopefully, if you enjoy your experience and you keep going back, then that will naturally, gradually
And it's
build
worth
up.
saying if I didn't go, someone else would have. That seat would have got taken.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
So
couldn't get a ticket for the final, so
I
you
now feel
took my
bad.
ticket. Well, no, I don't. That's what's that.
You'd
What?
have had to
Don't want to
leave
see
with
Man
me, Lauren,
United
with
win.
15 minutes to
Yeah,
go because we're getting beat so badly.
yeah, exactly.
Lauren, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Anything you want to plug before we finish?
No, just your Patreon. Go
Thank you, mate.
sign up for Planet FPL if you haven't already.
I shall plug Clayton's gig as well on obviously the Her
Hmm.
Game 2 podcast. Keep an eye on Clayton's feed. He'll be retweeting stuff whenever he's doing a podcast with them as well. Lauren, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the new women's football season. Be nice to each other, everyone. Cue music, please. Man sharp.